Hello and welcome once again. Widespread condemnation has followed news of Russia entering Poland's airspace with drones. 3 Russian drones were shot down by Polish and other NATO aircraft in Poland's airspace during overnight attacks on Ukraine. Prime Minister Donald Tusk says Poland recorded 19 drone incursions, with some flying deep enough to temporarily close 4 airports, including Warsaw's main hub at Chopin. Russia's defense ministry says there has been no plans to target facilities in Poland's territory. Its temporary charge d'affaires in Poland says Warsaw has not provided evidence that the drones were of Russian origin.
W szczególności tej chwili, dlatego pozwoliłem sobie w polskiej przestrzeni powietrznej
19 specific violations and infractions of airspace have been reported and precisely located, but this data is not definitive. This is the first time during this war that the drones are not coming from Ukraine due to an error, navigation issues, or minor Russian provocations. For the first time, a significant number of these drones have flown over Poland directly from Belarus. For now, we confirm the destruction of 3 drones. It is highly probable that a 4th one was also shot down, and it is also possible that there were more. There is no reason today to claim that we are at war. However, it is undeniably true that this provocation goes beyond previous limits and is incomparably more dangerous for Poland than all previous ones.
prowokacja przekracza dotychczasowe granice i ma charakter nieporównywalnie bardziej niebezpieczny z punktu widzenia Polski niż wszystkie pozostałe.
I think what we have seen last night was a very successful reaction by NATO and allies, including of course Poland itself, but also the Dutch and the Italians and the Germans, everybody involved. And I'm really impressed. So of course we always have to make sure that we are one step ahead, but I think last night showed that we are able to defend every inch of NATO territory, including of course its airspace. Thank you so much. And to Putin, I mean, my message is clear. Stop the war in Ukraine. Stop the escalating war, which he is now basically mounting on innocent civilians and civilian infrastructure. Stop violating Allied airspace and know that we stand ready, that we are vigilant and that we will defend every inch of NATO territory.
Mr. Speaker, last night Russia launched drones into Poland in an unprecedented attack. I've been in touch with the Polish Prime Minister this morning to make clear our support for Poland. We will stand firm in our support for Ukraine. With our partners and through our leadership of the coalition willing, we will continue to ramp up the pressure on Putin until there's a just and lasting peace.
Zahl. Russland muss wissen, dass die NATO handlungsfähig ist und dass sie reagieren wird.
Russia must know that NATO is capable of acting and that it will respond to defend NATO territory. But at this stage, I believe it is right that we analyze precisely where we stand, what has happened, with what intention it has happened, and that we also prepare carefully for any repeat incidents.
Für Wiederholungsfälle.
Well, let's bring in international affairs analyst Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Dr. Marek, glad to have you join us. Now, juxtapose what the German Vice-Chancellor has said about the danger of Russia extending this war beyond Ukraine with this drone attack on Poland.
Yes, there is such a danger. The war may indeed so escalate into Poland. And clearly, this sort of action, which may well have been to test Polish defenses, or possibly may have been an error, though I doubt it, is just one of the starting points. And so therefore, yes, there is a danger now for all, Poland especially, but other NATO countries to take into account.
You've in a way answered that question, but let's just push it a little bit further. Do you sincerely think that it was accidental? Russia's defense ministry says there have been no plans to target facilities in Poland's territory. Do you sincerely think it was accidental?
The problem is you can't really take at face value, or more than face value, what the Russians say. So therefore, the comment by the Russian government is of minimal importance. The question is to try and analyze what happened. The drones came in, there were many of them, they went quite a long way. that it was an error would seem to be unlikely. Why couldn't they have been turned back? Why did it go so close to the Polish border in the first place if it was an error? Why even go and send so many drones over there? So it doesn't sound likely that it's an error. Far more likely is that it's a test. It's a double test to see how the Polish defenses work and see what NATO will do. What is interesting is there are 3 points. First of all, America is yet to speak. Secondly, yes, the Polish defenses worked, and NATO, in the European sense of the word, certainly spoke out, as did, of course, Great Britain and Germany, and, of course, Poland. Thirdly, this is, alas, of course, what I predicted in my books, that the war would sooner or later escalate to Poland.
Yeah, let me take you up on that. Does it look like the warning you gave in your book about the Russian-Ukrainian war escalating, does it look like it's manifesting now?
Yeah, it certainly is a possibility. If it was not an error, then it was quite clearly just simply a chance to see what Poland would do in its defenses, whether it would stand firm, what its reply would be, and equally what NATO would do. So yes, it would fit in with the theory that I've propounded, that basically the war will switch into being a Russian-Polish war at some point, escalate towards this.
Let's even extend this a little bit further. Is there even just the slightest danger? I mean, 19 drones, only about 5 that the Polish had to shoot down. Is there even just the slightest danger of World War III springing up from these incidents?
Well, actually, strictly speaking, yes, since any incident can promote a war. For example, the sinking of an American liner brought America into war, the Lusitania in World War I. So any incident can do it. The question is whether Russia is planning or not. We know they're going to hold exercises in the near future about what would it is tantamount to just such a war in Poland. And therefore, this would be the start of the probing. And in that sense, yes, it is a start. But in your sense of the word, which I imagine is basically, is it now full-blown war immediately? No, it more likely is that this probing will continue and the actual war itself, if it were to start, will be on a far more serious level.
What really should the international community be doing now, not just Europe and America, to rein in Putin?
I don't think it's really possible, I'm afraid. I mean, an international community can scarcely rein in Israel, if it can indeed at all, because only Donald Trump has any influence there. And that's a small country. Russia's the biggest country in the world. It has huge reserves of nuclear arms. There is no way of reining in Putin in that sense. And please note, not only has he got allies, but increasingly quite clear there is a bloc of countries on his side. So it's not a question of reining him in. It's rather a question, can he be put off? And the answer is, there is nothing much that can really put him off, except if he feels that such an attack will be unproductive. However, it also hinges entirely on America. So the rest of the world, it can condemn such an attack. It can state that it does not support any Russian attack on Poland, and quite possibly President Putin may take some note of this, although, to be honest, I doubt it. In much the same way as President Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu takes no interest in what the rest of the world says about any of his actions.
Very dangerous indeed. What about its likely implications for other nations to embark on such brazen show of strength against lesser countries?
Yeah, well, that's been the case for 6,000 years, and I don't suppose it's going to change in the near future. Basically, big countries bully small ones, and that has been the state of play for a long time. What is more interesting is whether in smaller countries or other countries like NATO as a bloc can prepare for such war. And here the problem really is that if I'm correct in all my analysis, it will not be a normal conventional war such as Ukraine. It will be a nuclear war. And that is very hard to prepare against because, of course, the nukes make a lot of destruction, as Hiroshima and Nagasaki showed. And so that is the problem. Can, in effect, a smaller neighbor arm themselves against a big neighbor which has absolutely ginormous reserves in comparison and very strong weapons in comparison?
Poland has called for NATO meeting immediately after this incident. Do you expect a ramping up of sanctions or what?
Very much depends on President Donald Trump. The EU may well ramp up sanctions. It's constantly saying it's ramping them up and constantly announcing new sanctions. I don't suppose President Putin really cares much about that. What he would care about is what America says. And here, for totally different reasons, namely to do with the fact that Ukraine war isn't in any likelihood of finishing soon, he has been talking about ramping up sanctions on India and China. But the key question is, will he? Does he? Does he want this? Will he take part in this Clause 4 meeting? Because after all, please remember, President Donald Trump has sidelined NATO, like Europe. He has no interest in it. He was on one-on-one negotiations with Russia or everybody else around the world. And therefore, the meeting about Clause 4, if we don't watch out, will actually be a signal to Putin that NATO really is weakened. Because if America doesn't turn up, and if America doesn't back any moves, then NATO will be shown up to be a paper tiger. That's the problem.
Now, Zelensky is calling the escalation an extremely dangerous precedent for Europe. How dangerous, really, is this?
Well, I'm not quite sure what he has in mind. If it's a dangerous move, then I grant you it is. Then again, so was the Russian-Ukrainian war. And certainly it is, I think, mean by president, he means that it's the first such move. That's what I think he means. And in which case, yes, it is a first serious move. The previous time there was something stated, turned out to be a mistake. It turned out to be Ukrainian drones. Here, it's more than likely they are Russian, fired from Belarus. And here, of course, there is indeed a sort of dangerous aspect to it. But please note, this is a probing. If there really was sent by Russia deliberately, then this is a probing action. That's all. It's not going to be World War III tomorrow. It's just to see what's going on. There may well be others. And the point about such actions is that they are not an immediate danger, but they may well escalate into a danger. They are a harbinger, if you like.
West response not enough to make Putin fear sending drones to Poland. That this yet is another example of West management of the escalation falling because of fears of provoking Russia into something more aggressive and violent. Do you agree with that analysis?
Unfortunately, that is actually something to bear in mind. Russia is, from that point of view, a strange country. On the one side, it's very aggressive. On the other side, it fears the West. And if we don't watch out, we can tip it over into the other direction, not thinking it can win, but simply that it must act to defend itself. This is, after all, the logic of Israel, is it not? It must strike other countries, even which technically it's not at war at, which is, of course, totally illegal, simply because it feels threatened by them. So therefore, yes, it is a consideration. And therefore, yes, there is another aspect to it. If it's not a very sturdy response, will Russia take this as a sign of weakness? And again, the answer is yes, that is indeed possible. The fact of the matter is, it's a very difficult and complicated situation. But the notion of the Clause 4 meeting, hopefully attended by America, would send some sort of signal. But then again, it is difficult. It is right not to over-reply because of those reasons. But there is no easy route to avoiding World War III if Russia is determined to press ahead with making the Suwalki Gap Russian, because that's, of course, what the issue is. It wants to link up with the Kaliningrad exclave.
Dangerous times, one would say, the way it looks, Marek. But before I let you go, EU leaders have strongly condemned the violations. What more can they possibly do, or what more do you expect them to do?
They will probably threaten more sanctions or implement. However, sanctions of limited use, it will send some sort of signal to Russia. But to be honest, there's not much they can do in the sense that no one wants to actually start the war. And so therefore, if you like, everyone's somewhat hamstrung. And consequently, this is one reason why the slow escalation to World War III appears to be inexorable. However, at present, nothing absolutely fatal happened, and so there's every hope that at some possibility, some point, we can stop the escalation and, so to speak, get off this bus.
All right, always interesting discussing with you your analysis, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz, our international affairs analyst from London. Thank you so much.